think
I
of?
know you, but I don't know you well enough to embarrass you.
Hi everybody, my name is Charles Nick, one of the co-founders of Third Wave Water, and I'm here with Nick Berardi, the super cool guy who just won Roaster of the Year. Was that like last year?
Oh no.
2 years ago?
Utopian Coffee, where I roast now, we were a finalist for Macro Roaster of the Year
Okay.
this year. It was in 2020
2020.
that we won Micro Roaster of the Year back in Mostra, but we're getting the cart before the horse
Oh,
here.
yeah. So, anyways, Nick Berardi, everybody, and I'm super excited to talk to him and ask him all kinds of fun questions because he's kind of been there, done that on so many different levels for roasting. And I'm excited for you to find out some very fun stories that we've already talked about beforehand. So what in the world got
We're
you
not gonna share the two fun ones,
Oh,
right?
no. Well, I mean, as far as you want to go, it's
Okay.
totally up to you. So what got you into coffee?
Got me into coffee was back when I was at Ohio State, and it seemed like working in the air conditioning would be more fun than working in the landscaping over the summer. And it started out as just a job at a more of a second wave type place where we had a lot of candy bar type drinks. But
Yeah.
I met some great people there. Guy John, who was my friend in high school, and I met a good friend Heather Brisson there, who is part of my overall story. She was a barista at that company, and then I'd moved to Portland and eventually San Diego. And I had never.
Portland and San Diego, like
That's
that-
where Heather's like a hidden legend in coffee. People, she's not on a lot of magazine covers, but
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I worked with some great people at Cafe Brioso in
Oh.
Columbus. Yeah, Jeff and Carl. Yeah, they're hanging around here. And they really got me into third wave coffee.
Okay, Brandon Bird, did you work with him at all there?
He was not. I had left there before.
Oh.
I met him at a Golden Bean in Columbus
Okay.
a couple of years ago. So awesome guy as well. But Jeff and Carl really opened my eyes to what coffee could be. I have a background in cooking and culinary stuff. I cooked at a couple of really awesome restaurants in Columbus, and the idea, going back to when I was young, of being a contributor
Yeah.
from my father. My father is like a flashlight in a dark room when it comes to that stuff. That he instilled that idea of a contributor, and I think that's something that overall is part of the value chain of coffee. But from getting into cooking fine dining was because my father's an architect, and I like the idea of being a contributor across, like, if you can take what are the 5 basic needs, it's shelter, clothing, food, sleep, and water, and no human being can live without that. But if you can take one of those necessities and elevate it to something that enriches people's lives, that inspires, that gives joy, that's something that's always been a part of where I try to live my life. And that's what I brought from the culinary industry into coffee. And the value chain of coffee impacting so many lives was illuminated to me by Jeff and Carl. And that we could take something that's so complex with, over 800 biochemicals, whatever, that comprise flavor in coffee.
Yeah.
You know all about the science better than I do.
Well, on the water side, you know more about it on the.
There's
the
more
tasting
water
side.
in coffee than coffee, right? But yeah, that's what got me into coffee. And then Heather had worked at some really awesome places in Portland before moving to San Diego, and then moving to Hawaii. It's like every place
You lived in Hawaii?
Oh no, Heather did.
Oh, Heather did. Okay.
Every place she moved was like more paradise than the last. But she was roasting at Berardi Coffee,
Okay.
and got me a job basically part-time in the mailroom. So I bought a car, packed up my dog, drove across the country, and couch surfed for a month or two until I found an apartment working for Chuck Patton, the founder of Berardi Coffee.
Wow.
And all I mentioned all these people by name because I feel like any achievements I have are just kind of being along for the ride with some amazing people,
Wow.
So
No, it's a good
that's
way
what
to
got
put
me
it.
in.
It's interesting. Even when I worked in aviation, and when I got my job at NASA, it was because a friend of mine I had made before was the one that had contacts there. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't apply, and I'm like, I'm so smart, everybody. Bring me in because of that. And it was like a great contact, a good friend that I had made before. We kind of split from contracts, and then he went back to NASA.
Mhm.
I was amazed from some of the stories he told, and he's like, well, would you want to apply? And I'm like, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah,
I think
so
that's what
many
I
times.
appreciate about your mindset and your approach to what you guys do at Third Wave Water is that you have that exploratory, that inquisitive mind, and that's what, helps a lot of people. That critical thinking is a skill that's a little lost nowadays, but it is that curiosity tied with that I think helps people excel, specifically in the coffee industry.
Yeah, so the first time you and I met was a big party. There's
Yeah.
celebration. I think that was the 2020 party.
Yeah, so I joined Bird Rock and Heather after they had won Micro Roaster of the Year.
Yeah.
And so I was, really lucky to work with some awesome people over there who Chuck had hired, Jocelyn and Nikki, and Heather specifically was really kind of a mentor for me. Working with Heather was my first time really touching a coffee roaster.
Oh, wow.
But it's kind of funny, we were roasting on one of the first Giesens ever in America.
What?
And then we bought a Loring, and Chuck was like, "Hey Nick, I need you to do sales so we can pay for this Loring." So I didn't really get to fully
I may have
apprentice under
overextended
Heather.
ourselves. Can you help us?
Well,
No, I'm just teasing.
that's how coffee is. You
Yeah.
know, you got to dare to be different. And dare, is a big thing. So, but yeah, I ended up at Mostra Coffee, is what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
And I had left a job that it was, more corporate coffee, and it's kind of unsatisfactory, and I just wasn't at a great spot in my life. And
Sure.
Ryan Sullivan, who was a barista back at Bird Rock,
Ryan, you crazy man.
yeah, I just got a shot of espresso from him. Sorry if I'm rambling. I
No,
try
this is
not
great.
to drink too much
Which
coffee.
booth is Ryan at right now?
He was at Mavam a couple minutes
Okay,
ago.
Mavam.
We'll see where he is later.
Shout out Mavam, we love you too.
Yeah. Ryan's director of coffee at Mostra, and
Yeah.
I was kind of in between things, and he convinced the 4 awesome owners of Mostra to take a chance on just hiring me as just to help out barista, because they didn't really have any other roles at that point that needed filled. But at that point, they had previously applied for Roast Magazine's Roaster of the Year application, and were in the process of doing so as I was working extended barista hours during Mostra nights. I think like Baywatch
Mostra
nights.
nights.
But yeah,
That sounds cool.
so
a little glamorous. That's fun.
through instilling some coffee knowledge that had been instilled into me into their baristas, and working with the guy Alan, who was doing their roasting at the time, and Mike, one of the owners, who was also roasting.
Yeah, Mike's great.
Ryan, kind of engaged me into the process of selecting coffees to submit for the Roast of the Year application. And
Yeah.
we went through a couple hundred samples to select what we
smokes.
wanted to have ready, and sent that in, and then we won Micro Roaster of the Year.
So anybody watching this, understand, a couple hundred samples, like you
Green
micro
samples.
roasted them, sampled,
Yeah.
you went through the process. That's a lot of time.
That is
Like,
a lot of
that's not
time.
like, oh yeah, we're just going to apply our stuff that's sitting on the shelf and we're good to go. And
Well, but I mean that's part of, I mentioned the inquisitiveness. I think doing something with intention is really crucial to what we're going to do with it. Just like you got the different profiles for what works, instead of just like, here's some bicarb, throw it in your water.
Yeah.
So that was something, and that Moster's got a thing where it's like being extra is kind of like nothing's done halfway, everything's over the top, as you know from when we won Micro Roaster of the Year. Rented out a ballroom and threw a big old party that happy that you were able to
it was
come
awesome.
to.
It was worth every moment. I was so happy I came out for that event.
Yeah, it was such a cool thing. I had to change at the warehouse because that really, exposed a lot of people to Mostra, and we were filling orders, up until I had to change and get ready to go to the party. So that was awesome. But yeah, that was a great chapter of my life in San Diego, and was really formative because I basically at that point had only theoretical knowledge about roasting coffee.
Oh, wow.
And so taking some of what I had seen Heather do and applying that onto the roaster at Mostra, a classic SF25 from San Franciscan. But like, when I say classic, I mean like old in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. There were things because things need replaced when they get old, but
Yeah.
it was actually the original roasty for Krispy Kreme donuts when they first started roasting their own coffee. So it had a real thick actual cast iron drum. which I know because maintenance had, been falling off a little bit before I started. And one Sunday night I was roasting and the drum fell off the front bearing. And I had no idea what to do. And I was frantically emailing San Franciscan and just, again, awesome people that I've had the chance to be, a part of the journey
Was Mark Michelson there at the
He
point?
was not there yet. He was still at Onyx.
Okay.
And he had, I think, just won Roaster of the Year for the U.S. Championship the year prior.
Yeah.
I was frantically trying to figure out what to do, and my phone rang, and it was Bill Kennedy, the owner of San Franciscan, who was, he was sitting on the couch with his grandchildren, his 3 grandchildren, I think 3, watching like a Disney movie or something. He called me because he got an email ping him at 9 p.m. on a Sunday and walked me through basically, well, you're not supposed to do this without a tech, but if there was a tech there, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and I got the drum remounted on the bearing, and everything was copacetic after that. So just awesome people all along the way, and that was so cool. But Mark Michelson, awesome guy, U.S. roasting champ. That was, I try to be humble and not bring that up, but I did win the championship in 2022. So
whatever, no, you can bring it up. So there's a side of like humility. We call it Midwestern humility that kind of kills almost momentum of being able to talk about stuff that you've done. So like a lot of startups have a hard time in Midwest because we're like, oh, I'm so sorry for existing, and we do
like
amazing things.
Or something.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you're allowed to talk about the amazing things you've done.
Yeah.
In the execution, how you say it, that's where we'll go back and forth on what's maybe humble and what's being prideful or over humble. But you've done amazing things, and that's why I was super excited to have you on. Yeah. and like meeting you in San Diego, and then you had moved to Indiana to help Utopia, and they're awesome folks anyways, and then all of a sudden you're like stepping into like, I'm gonna try out for championship stuff now on my own, to kind of see how that goes. Share how that happened.
That was actually still at Mostra. So
that was a Mostra.
Yeah, Utopian, awesome company, and I'll tell you more about that in a second because we're doing a lot of stuff with Regenerative Certified coffee, and it's that's really in my heart in terms of talking about contributing in the value chain. But shortly after we had the Micro Roaster of the Year party, it was 2020. Dun, dun, dun. And we all know what happened there. So they, I wasn't necessarily cajoled into it, but I wasn't too confident of competing in the U.S. championships because I had only been roasting, part-time, full-time for a couple months at that point. But Ryan and I drove up to Orange County for the qualifiers for the U.S. Championships early 2020.
Okay.
And it was really interesting to me because they were like, the competition is different now than it was then, but there were like 40 competitors, 42, I think, mostly from the West Coast there competing for one of the spots for the national championship. And there were like 4 other people from San Diego who were bigger names and more well-regarded roasters, and I was the only roaster from San Diego who qualified. But then the world ended, so the silver lining there was that over the contravening 2 years between the qualifiers and the 2022 U.S. Championships in Boston, I basically taught myself to roast because working through the pandemic. And it was basically just Ryan and I in the warehouse because, everybody got furloughed and stuff like that. I'd apply theories from, Ann Cooper, or Rob Hoos, or other people who were like Jen Apodoka, who I competed against in Boston. And it was like, holy, I'm competing against somebody whose knowledge I've taken to form how I roast coffee. And it was, that was really tough though, because just a lot of times, one of the awesome things, Mostra's owners are really giving, and so we did a thing for like healthcare workers, and I would have to transcribe people's notes to their mail orders of like, hey, like people sending coffee to surgeons of like, thanks for trying to save my grandma's life.
Crazy.
It still chokes me up now because like there's some tough days there, but. Anyway, it still resulted in winning the U.S. Championship, and then after that, came the move to Utopian. you know, Mostra and I were kind of growing apart in different ways, but it was also, my mother got lung cancer. She beat the hell out of it,
Wow.
real strong woman.
Wow. Yeah,
And moving back to the Midwest to be a couple-hour drive away from family
yeah.
was really great. So I got kind of lucky that I applied to Utopian when I did. I was looking to kind of stay on the West Coast maybe, and my mom said, why don't you apply? I was like, I don't know anything about Fort Wayne, Indiana. No offense, guys, I love it there now. I had applied right after Adam Walsh applied, who, for people who don't know, Adam Walsh was, for over at least a dozen years, the head roaster and director of coffee at JBC out of Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow.
And so he's, I think, like over 400 coffee reviews of over 94 points. It's like ridiculously prolific in terms of like executing amazing coffees. He applied right before I did. And so he went down and interviewed. And then a week later, I flew out to Fort Wayne and interviewed over 2 days with Brendan Maxwell, the founder, and Scott McKay, who does a lot of operations at Utopian.
Yeah.
And after I wrapped my interview, they were like, well, so there's another really strong candidate. Like, do you think you guys could get along? Because, like, when you have people who have reached, I didn't necessarily reach the mountaintop, but I had an award in my pocket or two, that you're concerned about people butting heads, and
do it my way.
Well, and it's just
collab.
It's a nice blessing that Brendan took the meme, why not both? Adam and I have been working together for over a year and a half now, and it's just been great. Like trying to make sure that we like push each other along the way, and I've learned he worked as a roaster a lot longer than I had been, but I'd been in the coffee industry longer than him.
Okay.
So there's different aspects where we could try to help strengthen each other. And he's an awesome guy, real soft spoken, but you wouldn't know he brings a sledgehammer of roasting, like just knowledge and perspicacity and experience. And so,
wow.
So that's a lot of what we're doing now at Utopian Coffee is. Brendan founded the company 18 years ago with his cousin, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And it's just a focus on, part of the company mission has always been, let's keep Mama Earth healthy. And so that's the regenerative coffee thing that we're focusing on now. So awesome stuff around there.
That is crazy. So you kind of jumped me on what are you doing now? So
oh, sorry.
No, this is great. We're just rolling with it. And, that is super amazing, and we're so close. Like we're 2 hours away. We're in Xenia, Ohio, kind of around Dayton area.
Yeah.
And I was gone to Japan and Korea last couple weeks, and then I had like 4 days back in Ohio, and then straight here for a week.
Yeah, traveling, man.
I haven't had time to breathe, but we are going to make it up there.
Yeah,
I promise.
Well, we're under construction right now for a real decked out coffee lab built into our roasting facility.
That's exciting.
Yeah, our roasting facility is already really awesome. It's funny, almost every place I worked in San Diego real estate's a lot different than Fort Wayne.
Very
so
much.
It's easier for us to have the square footage that was lacking at some of the places. Not for any, basically every company I worked for in San Diego was awesome and great owners, but it's just not available, and so. That's a lot of what we do, is facilitated by the investment that Brendan has put into the company. And I mean, he just spent, I think he's still in New York for a regenerative farming and agriculture conference right now.
Okay.
We're really trying to push for what we're doing now. I went down to Peru last year and got to meet, and we didn't do a lot of like, let's visit the farms. We mostly went to co-op headquarters and went to fertilizer factories and things where Finca Churumpampa down there or Beneficio Torinos are two collectives / cooperatives that we worked very closely with this year, all about Eber and his wife Talia at Finca Churumpampa actually have the process of reusing all the detritus from the coffee farm, the dead trees, and they eat quiqui down there, which is guinea pig.
Oh, interesting.
But the droppings from there is really good fertilizer, and so they take Peru already back in like the 60s when organic got big, Peru was already basically organic. So that's why you see so much organic coffee from them. They didn't have to do anything from the certification. And a lot of the people are very in touch with the land, as in most agricultural, you know, whether it's farming in Indiana or farming in Peru, farmers are in touch with the soil.
Yeah.
So a lot of what they do is not just, you know, reprocessing into fertilizer, but experiments. Churumpampa has been experimenting with pelletizing the fertilizer, compressed into different sizes so that it doesn't wash away from the slopes. And there's a lot of agronomy going into it that's really, you know, it makes it worth us investing. It makes it, it's got to be mutually beneficial, you know? And the regenerative stuff is something that there's been a lot of certifications around coffee since organic, you know, UTZ, RFA, a lot of those things have been good, but I personally feel like the regenerative thing can be an actual next big step, because this is like, you know, I love words, you know, you can tell because I talk a lot. It's not just the coffee in my system.
No, this is great.
To me, sustainability is like, oh, that's nice, because we can't just sustain. Like, if I had a gaping wound in my stomach right now, I wouldn't want to sustain it, right?
Yeah.
I want to heal it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of makeup we have to do to the planet. We don't want to sustain where we're at. We want to regenerate the planet. Regenerative farming practices and ROA, Regenerative Organic Alliance, is one of the entities we do a certification through. We were the first roaster in the Midwest, not in America, but in the Midwest to get the certification. And it's about carbon sequestration. It's about replacing chemicals with jobs. You know, it's all of that stuff together that the farmers are seeing. With Beneficio Torinos, we traveled to a few farmers. I'm going to release an anaerobic natural from one of their farmers, Joel Silva, in the coming weeks. Check out utopiancoffee.com.
No, definitely. No, there is no shameless plug here. Just give the plug, and that's what.
Joel, you know, has found that he's actually getting better yields from a lot of the varietal experimentations he's doing because of the regenerative practices. Rather than sacrificing anything, they're gaining from it. Their cup quality is going up, and then they have the certification for the extra premium that we can pay them as well.
That's interesting. It kind of reminds me of part of Mokhtar Ashkenazi, his story with Porta Mocha when he went to Yemen, and he was kind of a big portion of what they were facing. It was like, yeah, you guys are doing coffee in this area, but it's a mess, and we've got to heal things, we've got to fix things, and that's how you get a better product in the end. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's I don't remember, it was like a YouTuber I saw 15 years ago yelling to the camera, "Words have meaning," you know, and like fair trade's like awesome people, like, you know, get their coffee certified fair trade, and, you know, the entity has done some good across the globe, and some people, you know, there's other aspects to it. I'm not going to, you know, speak good or bad towards any of that right now.
Sure.
But I think that that's one of those words things is like when you like just walking out of the bathroom at the airport landing here in Houston, they have the little thing like, how was your experience? Like bad, fair, good, or excellent. Like fair, like why have fair trade when we can have excellent trade? You know, why have sustainability when we can regenerate? You know, and that's trying to put the intentionality towards that like, you know, rule number one is it's got to be good coffee always, otherwise nobody's going to buy it. And luckily, a lot of our partners that are producing that coffee are having, I don't remember what score we got on it. We sent a Finca Churumpampa Pacamara separation to Coffee Review, and it got like a 93 or 94 or something from like a coffee that like otherwise just would have gotten blended into a container full of like, oh, hey, this is an 83 plus or something like that, you know?
No, that's awesome.
That's fun stuff. I mean, we're really lucky to do what we do, you know?
No, this is great. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I haven't heard anybody explain very well yet. So I appreciate you kind of taking the next step and saying, okay, you have a goal of making something that's healthy for the environment, but like, how do you heal the environment?
Yeah.
And honestly, that part of the conversation I haven't heard explained well. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's something I put some thought. I appreciate you saying that. I don't feel like I'm necessarily very eloquent or incisive
You're eloquent.
about it. But well, I use a lot of words. I'll say that. I think one of the things I try to work on is personal growth is being more concise. But sometimes the purple prose that comes out, it can hopefully inspire people to actually taking a step back and looking at that. But it's taking that thoughtfulness to when I'm standing behind the roaster to when we're gathering around the cupping table. I got my third wave water cupping spoon. Have spoon will travel. Never leave home without one. So it's just a pleasure to do that and a pleasure to share that with people. So.
Well, Nick, I really appreciate your time, man.
Thanks,
Thank you so much for coming by, saying hi to our viewers, we'll split this up into some fun bite-sized pieces because there's tons of knowledge in this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and I actually was concise for me.
There's brilliance and brevity, and I think you got it, and you hit a lot of amazing topics. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Charles. It's been a pleasure, man. I appreciate it.